So this is something I've been waiting for a really long time to do, and I'm really, really excited about having this conversation. So who we have with us is Bob Cullen, and I'm going to let him do his bio for us and his background a little bit. But I met Bob. I'll just give a brief synopsis of it. I was working for Penn Gaming as a supervisor manager at their property in Perryville, and they asked me to go out to Kansas City to help with an opening, as they do with big openings, right? They grab people from different properties to go out and put in systems and whatnot so that it's cohesive. And when I went out there, sat down. I was supposed to go out for a week, wound up staying for about 3 weeks to a month. And the first day I was out there, and these are days we work like 20, 24 hours a day, you know. I sat down in the general manager's office, and this guy comes in and just starts running things. And I was like, who in the hell is this dude? The only thing I can compare it to is the wolf from Pulp Fiction coming in and just saying, you know what, this is how things are done. This is where you're messing up. This is where you don't know what you're doing. Have we thought about this? Are we anticipating this? And there wasn't too much of that going on at the time, and it blew my mind to watch this guy operate. And that man, of course, was Bob Cullen sitting across from me. Bob is like a mentor to me, and I'm really excited to have this conversation. Bob, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background in food and beverage, how you got into it, and we'll go from there.
Good. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah.
Glad to be here for my great friend, Pat. My background and what brought me to Kansas was, probably 20 years in the making by the time we met. I really actually started out going to school to be a teacher, and a coach and a phys ed teacher and all that good stuff. And to make ends meet to pay for college, I went to bartending school and got my certification. Got my first bartending job and fell in love with it. It was people skills, interaction. Going from the family business of construction and teaching. I just loved every second of it.
Right on.
So with that being said, I would go in the off season of school and work in the beverage industry, which was, as we all know, back in the late 80s, was an incredibly successful business. My first bartending job was H.C. McDougal's.
H.C. McDougal's.
Yeah, I think it's at Delphia's now, but quite successful.
Wow.
And it was a corporate-owned, themed restaurant by, of all people, Campbell Soup. And the reason I bring that up is because it was extremely ahead of its time in HR commitment of training.
Wow.
So it was extremely well organized. It was, as a Super Bowl week, it could be discussed. There was a game plan. Everybody knew what their job was, what their position was, and your job was to commit and contribute to the team effort. Extremely great effort. Next job was a local, very busy bar and restaurant in Escalon Mall at the time. The malls back in that day were extremely busy.
Right.
So my first general manager or owner left and went to what was the newest thing, the growing casino industry in Atlantic City, and that was very interesting because, our area didn't have a lot of experience to bring a lot of talent to that part. We didn't have that hotelier experience.
Right.
That wasn't the labor market that our area provided, right?
Right.
So it was exciting, and when that individual went down to Atlantic City, they were promoted up and through because it was a growing industry. And they referred me to replace that position. And that brought me into the Atlantic City world. I was a suburb, youngest of 5 brothers, construction, we're going to be teachers, and at the end of the day, our whole family were, we were athletes. That's what our family did.
Right.
It was about winning state championships in football or, wrestling. That was my vision. But Excuse me. But what was interesting as it grew is that coaching, teaching, as I have the luxury of looking back now in retrospect, the coaching, the teaching, the being part of a team, even a big family, work ethic, is what worked within that environment. Because some folks, when they first remember, if I'm on the money with the perception, they looked at the casinos as glitz and glamour. We'll get into that.
What year are you talking about? Your first property?
Yeah, probably mid '80s, late '80s.
Yeah, it was a bear down there.
Well, it was the economy. It was a phenomenal time. We're talking, dollars and business levels that were never comprehended for our area. Nor was their volume of customer service ever seen at that level, right? So as we were talking about, and trying to get through what brought me to the table there was that in Atlantic City, I was very fortunate because I was in my own backyard. We had Glassboro State, Rowan. We're all going to be teachers because that's what we had.
Right.
We had construction because that's what we had. We had real estate because that's what we did. We grew tomatoes. We were eating our Jersey corn. We were pretty simple folks, right? So when that sophisticated level of business came in, you either stepped up to the table and got the opportunity, But for me, it's like yesterday when I stepped into Ceasar's, which in the day was the IBM professional corporate scenario, extremely professional, professionalism oriented.
Right. White shirt.
No question.
Yep.
No
White
question.
shirt, pressed, everything. Yeah.
So, I had a decision to make. I had to get that job, which was sophisticated in and of itself, stepping into that building. So, which I got that, and I'll never forget the day. It's like making a team.
Yeah.
And to accelerate the story, my first job was a restaurant manager in that particular property. Sounds simple. When I look back now, it was 123 seats, and it did $12 million a year.
Wow.
So,
God damn.
So,
oh my God.
So there was a decision to make, and I have so much respect for both of you guys. I've seen your operation. I've worked with you. So we know what work's all about, right?
Right.
So at the end of the day, I had to make a decision. I had never could even comprehend that kind of volume or that level of strategic expertise and management. So I was either going to make or break it. And so it went well. But it was a commitment. It was a learning experience. And I'm forever grateful for that experience because it took the great people that I was fortunate enough that raised me, from coaches to family to neighbor, community. It took all that to fit in with that corporate scenario because I didn't have the experience.
Right.
So fast forward, quickly promoted to beverage manager. My first day in beverage, 7 months after starting there, I had so I was responsible for 1,100 employees, and I started on New Year's Eve.
Wow. Oh my God.
In the bar business. So
Nice.
You want to talk about behind bars?
Throwing
I'm lucky I ever got out.
Throwing in the fire,
Lucky
right?
I got out, right? So we had ballrooms, we had restaurants, we had the Pointer Sisters in the showroom, Circus Maximus. There's a whole history to that. And we were opening, 2,200 bottles of champagne, So
2,200.
Wow. So that was the scenario there. Very fortunate. Again, I was probably one of the youngest directors ever promoted within Ceasar's. Very proud of that to this day. And the experience was going into the culinary world with highly European trained chefs, world-class hoteliers. There really was the people that I worked side by side with every day, my new teammates, were transient, hardworking folks from all areas of Marriott, the hotelier world, which wasn't in our area.
Right. Which in itself is a culture that, like you're saying, it was not known to this area. It's bureaucratic. It's big.
Yeah, city stuff.
Yeah, it's exactly right. Yeah.
Sure. Well said. And and the biggest part of that was it applies to everything that you and I just walked through, Joe. There's the culinary world, the back of the house.
Right.
There's the front of the house. The carpet versus the tile. And the history of how that worked. When I started down there, the Chef Heiko was God Almighty.
Right.
It was food driven, and that's the way it was going to be, and we made that happen, and I was fortunate enough to work my way through there, and to watch a transition of people skills, where that front of the house learned that back of the house, and the back of the house had to learn the front of the house.
Right. Get along.
Cross training, but really it's about respect, right?
Yeah.
What a major transition that was, to watch the customer experience, become, go from good to incredible, which is what made that initial company that I worked for, be the Tom Brady Buccaneer. Everybody knew their job. Everybody felt good about it. People were happy on a daily basis. So with that said, as all you guys were there and we're going through this biography, I had to really start at the beginning, because I really had to start from the beginning and to really learn the craft. Mm-hmm. So from there, there was a new property opening. I was there 7 years, Ceasar's back in the day. It's like yesterday. Best year, best learning years of my life. Very much appreciative of that. There was a property opening by the name of Trump Taj Mahal. And it was the 8th wonder of the world. And Joe, I have so much respect for you, not only in all of the business attributes that you have, but also your eye for detail with construction.
Oh,
so you can appreciate the fact of $1 billion in construction in the 90s. The first $1 billion with a B property. Wow. The politics of the financing and all of that, I'll leave to the side.
Sure.
But I would say
you could be president someday.
Well said, Bob.
I wasn't watching CNN back then, but at the end of the day, it was an incredible experience to be able to be exposed to that type of financial resources of equipment, supplies, training, and just an investment in people, product, and profit. Our equipment was second to none. We were innovative. We were inventive, and the management from top to bottom was the worst I've ever seen.
Really
crazy.
Best
poker room in Atlantic City.
But it's not. And I don't say that. It's not a personal comment that I'm making, because I don't do that. Right. It was a learning experience for me, in that what you don't do.
Right.
The importance and the value of keeping coworkers with length of service engaged, to not have turnover. Because the reason I say that it was challenged was because the amount of turnover due to the volume from top to bottom was at a level that you couldn't get continuity. And you had, we were doing, I'll give you an example, one restaurant, we were doing 7,000 people a day. So it's really not a good time to get a new president or a new, head of department, or let alone the person that controls your equipment and knives and forks. So right. Every week we were doing that. So I bring that up because it applies to all of us, right?
Yeah. I think the efficiency of a broken system at times, it does more damage to fix it and make it perfect, like the 80-20 rule, right? We see it all the time,
Well said.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Sometimes it's like, okay, we could go out and get a new vendor for XYZ, but let's just keep paying this guy 20% more than market rate because
Sure.
we never have to worry about it, right?
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. So we went through that opening, right? So it was one of the largest hotel openings in the world. So Atlantic City really found its momentum, right? It went from, a redneck, South Jersey to we're opening $1 billion properties in a hurry.
That must have been an amazing time.
Yeah. A lot of transient, highly qualified, incredible talent brought in from all over the world to bring that expertise, to share that knowledge. And I would think that I would hope that the bright folks would have been the sponges that absorbed that, right? So that property was highly successful. A lot of people forget that aspect. I mean, from a customer, review and satisfaction level to a revenue, generation metric, just off the charts, absolutely off the charts. So I was there for probably 8 years. And for me, there was I was ready for something different. We've all been through that. Mm-hmm. And there was the themed restaurants came to life, the celebrity restaurants. You had the beginning of it with Hard Rock was the founding father of all restaurants, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But at the end of the day, Planet Hollywood had an energy as an independent restaurant that I had never seen in my career. And I was ready for this because I had been a number two. I was a great soldier to, the department heads for, a long time. And these independent restaurants offered, a general manager scenario where was your show? Yeah. It would be smaller, but it would have, the PR, the public relations aspect. It would have the merchandise piece, culinary, and it was your show. And that's what suited me at that time, and I was fortunate enough to get that when it came to Atlantic City. And it was within the building that I started. It was back in Ceasar's. Oh. So I mean, I've just been so fortunate all the way around. So I went back into a property that I knew. I knew the market. I knew the demographic. I knew the lay of the land. I knew the co-workers. I knew the landlord. And we had such volume. That was a 300-seat restaurant, 2 floors. It was in the front. 14 million. That's a powerful number, right? But the excitement, the vibe, the people coming in at that point in time it was really, really fun to watch and to be a part of. Yeah. And we all have these different jobs. We expect to be different. And the main reason I bring that up, that this particular job that I had most jobs for quite a number of years. Each of my jobs, I usually found a home. This job, I was only there a couple of years, but it stands out to me because of the fact that their commitment to training. Mm-hmm. Along the way, we have different jobs that make us part of who we are, mm-hmm. right? So part of this biography, and I don't mean to be long-winded with it.
No, it's okay.
It was the history of that. The same way I had to be a part of this to see the hotelier experience come from other areas, so to teach us how to fish, right? So that we, right. that we could pass that on, right? And this training aspect. I went into this little restaurant I was managing 1,300 employees, and now I had 300. I'm like, it's a walk in the park. Where are my cigars? They send you away for 6 weeks. Their mothership was in Disney.
This is as a manager?
As the general manager.
Okay.
So it was your store, your shop, right? You owned it. They certainly did a great job of getting your buy-in, you know?
Okay.
And I think that's a big part of what makes successful management.
Sure is.
Right? So 6 weeks, you'll get in every uniform. You'll do every job. You know, so I'm in Disney World. You know, again, you know, I'm from a little town in South Jersey. You know, that wasn't that long ago that this hotel, you know, what's all this casino action? So now here I am in Disney, and I'm in the host outfit outside with, you know, 10,000 people in line, you know, and seeing that experience. The next day, I'm behind the line cooking hamburgers. Each day before you take that job, you have to know your menu. You have to know your seating chart. You're tested. If you don't get a 90%, you don't get on the floor. You do each job.
Walk the 5 miles in everyone's shoes.
Well said, right? You know, we'll never forget it to do it. And there was no exceptions. It was it was expected, and you know, executed on a daily basis. That this is the way it goes, and you model that behavior. So with that said, every position. 6 weeks later, I'm ready to graduate. I got my white sneakers on.
Where's my
Disney.
keys?
I don't even know what town I'm from anymore. You know, it's so I go back to Atlantic City to take over my store, and I walk into my office. Couldn't be happier. You know, excited to be home. You know, because at the end of the day, I'm from South Jersey. You know, we're not big world travelers.
Now this was an opening, correct?
No, it was already open.
Oh, okay. So it was already existing in the footprint.
This one was already open.
Ooh.
And they had a really good strategy for marketing. When they wanted to drive traffic, they had celebrity appearances, right? So you know, so my first day on the job, I'm trying to find out where I put my suitcase or whatever the case may be, and then I get a call from Orlando that, you know, Bruce Willis is on the way. He'll be there in 10 minutes. I'm like, okay.
Sounds like me when I book a party at Morgan's. Tell my managers,
Right?
Yeah, we got a party. It's only like 50 people. Well, what if 50 people walked in and just ordered pizza? What would you do then?
Exactly. And that was the excitement of what was going on. So with that comes, you know, the leak to the media. You know, we have photographers, in-house photographers. We're giving out merchandise. We've got leather jackets going on, and I go downstairs. You know, making sure I have my name tag on. What time was it? What was my training? What time am I doing? And there's 10,000 people surrounding the building because they already know somebody's coming. So a lot of fun, big learning experience, but certainly, you know, learning how to own it. So with that being said, the department head for Ceasar's, who was my mentor when I came in to start, you know, as that coffee shop manager that they only had 123 seats and 500 people wanted to eat. That we had to figure that out, right? So he retired or moved on, and I had the opportunity to take over the department where I started.
Nice.
You know, you would talk to some people in Atlantic City, had good days, bad days. I already hit the grand slam. I went full circle, loved every place I went, whatever the case may be. But what was cool about this was that when I came back where I started, the same people were there. And we had the opportunity to really understand the strategy and the objectives of the company, but also have walked in everybody's shoes there, where we really, really, tried to make sure that they have what they need to remove roadblocks, to unleash the customer service that would just have not been seen before. And that was really, really 7-8 years of just, we were doing $70 million a year at food and beverage revenue with pushing, give or take a few dollars. But it was every day you had to own it, right? You had to own that.
It's tough to wrap your head around those numbers.
It is. And, and listen, that's what I always said is that's not a reflection and you know, if we're smart, we need to know that that's no reflection on us. We didn't generate that business, so it's our responsibility to service it. You know?
Keep it.
But again, I still remembered, you know, I didn't even know, you know, where Marriott was when I met half of these folks. But it was now time for us to be the teachers,
Right.
right? And we were very fortunate in that the people that we had there were long-term people that really, really knew their job.
Right.
And that was a different type of management, where your job was to get out of their way, move the roadblocks, communicate effectively, you know, get a game plan that everybody buys into. And if you have a bad day, you recap it, you fix it, you move on and get better.
Right.
Yeah. So
Don't make it part of the culture.
yeah. So that was you know, that's a long journey we just went through. But I think it is absolutely necessary. It ties back to sports. It comes back to work ethic, game plan, and all that kind of good stuff.
What all properties in AC at the time were Caesars?
Well, that's interesting. It was really just Caesar's.
It was, right? Okay.
That was the original Caesar's World.
Right.
Bally's was by itself.
Bally's was by itself, and the
As
interesting.
Harris as well.
Interesting. Well, you guys are both hit the nail on the head, but there were two separate transactions, which is the mergers and acquisitions we're talking about. So these rocks that really were so successful they couldn't go wrong, but started buying each other. But at Bally's of all folks, which I did not expect at the time. Okay, now Caesars was bought originally by ITT, and then it was bought by Starwood. You know, if you remember that.
I remember this.
Right?
I remember that.
And then, but the neat thing for us local guys and ladies was that Bally's was homegrown. Bally's was, at that point in time, Park Place was oriented in Atlantic City. You know, the president and a lot of that ownership with a lot of folks involved. But at the end of the day, Park Place bought Caesars. Okay?
Right.
And along with that, you know, they built Paris, you know, and then we had the Flamingo, we had the Rio, you know, just unbelievable. Bally's in Vegas, and you had, you know, the growth around the country with regional casinos. But again, what a phenomenal experience, right? You know, so with that being said, I bring that up because of the fact that after going through that, through you know 2-3 years, you know, where there were, you know, multiple purchases of Caesars, you know, that's a whole transition of survival
Sure.
that we could do a whole nother podcast about, right?
Who do we have to kiss ass now?
Yeah, absolutely. And so many people have gone through that. And teams go, and then when one team goes, they bring that team over there, and that creates turnover and retraining opportunities and a slip in you know, operational
Conflict,
efficiencies,
yeah.
all that good stuff, right? So with that said, you know, we had all those purchases, and then Harris bought Caesars. Harris, at that point in time, you know, was based out of Atlantic City. And they had their own team,
Right.
you know. They were born and raised, you know, hoteliers, professionals. At this point in time, you had a lot of experience. It was not like when we first started. So at that point in time, you know, for getting back to me personally, is when I left Caesars, and they were kind enough with me to offer to extend my contract, and I was very, very thankful with that. But it just wasn't a fit. They were, you know, they had their way of doing things, and sometimes that happens. And I was thankful enough to be able to make my own decision. A lot of people didn't. So with that said, you know, I guess I had been doing this. All of a sudden, 25 years went by, and I decided that didn't work for me, and that seemed to make sense at the time. You know, I had a, you know, great family and home, and, you know, one of the, you know, best kids in the world, and I had everything. But I sort of forgot where my next job was going to be.
Right.
Because you're so used to doing that, right? And you work your 80 hours a week and take care of that. So that takes us to the next step in the biography, which would be something that I never thought would happen. When I left Harris, or, you know, And it doesn't even matter the name of the
Yeah,
companies
sure,
or
right.
the people or whatever the case may be. Great companies, great people, phenomenal opportunities, great days. Everybody was smart when money's flowing, right?
Right. Yeah.
So when I did leave after my second trip back to Caesar's, when I left, I actually talked to the regional president. And 3 weeks after that, I was sitting home with a little non-compete scenario, wondering what I was going to do and realizing I really wasn't prepared for this next step. So I really needed to take a look at that. And I think there's been a lot of people that have been are going through that right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm going through that to a certain extent right now. Everybody's going through that, right? So, so as I'm trying to think about what's going on, that regional president that I had talked to try and figure out a fit that didn't work out at that point in time. Fortunately, that I had not been through much of that. That individual left because at that time, as we bring it close to home, for bring it over the bridge to Pennsylvania. At that point in time, as I recall, and I was in most of the strategic planning meetings on a corporate level, we didn't really think Pennsylvania gaming was going to be that big a deal.
Right. And when is this? This is, I'm guessing, early 2000s?
Probably 2006,
Okay.
2007.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. We're getting out of the prehistoric era.
Harris was the first one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Philadelphia Park.
Philadelphia Park.
Philadelphia Park and then
Bingo.
Harris, yeah.
Spot on.
Yeah.
And the
I don't
individual, well, we're going to have some fun. We'll take this offline. So at the end of the day, the individual, that regional president I was talking about, called me and said, I need some help here. We have an opening that's really behind, a little bit behind schedule.
Property opening.
And, at that point in time, and I'm just going to try and fast track this, I don't mean to be a legend in my own mind, but everybody had their skill set.
Sure.
I started as a bartender, I was a construction, individual. I was I did all construction. I was a master of none of them. It was just, to keep me in shape for football. But at the end of the day, this individual called and said, I could really use your help, because everybody has to figure out what their contribution in work was. And mine was a sense of urgency, own it. Failure is not an option. I was not the most politically correct individual. Probably I was not. I had to learn that as I went through that. And so I went and I took that meeting in Philadelphia. I'll never forget it. I think it was at the Ritz-Carlton, and it was an unbelievable meeting. So it was Philadelphia Park.
Okay.
So I went into the consulting business. It was not a plan at the point.
Sure.
I didn't, and to fast track this biography, we called it consulting because that was the trending term at the time. I was an owner's advocate. I was a worker bee. I had people that I worked with that hopefully I earned their respect, and they were extremely generous and thoughtful of me being a part of that team. So we went from Pennsylvania, which was not to be much of a threat to Atlantic City. It ended up being incredibly successful. But I clearly remember that all of the pundits and the forecasting, no one ever forecasted, the success that the state of Pennsylvania was going to have. And and they always ended up saying, that Atlantic City fell on hard times. It dropped by X amount of revenue. I was not the accounting background type, but if you took the revenue in Pennsylvania and you added it to Atlantic City, it was almost within a couple million.
Right.
So it was clearly people that didn't need the ocean.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
to play their sport. So with that,
And New York too, right? So that had to be some impact, without getting too off topic. I think, was it Yonkers and Coney Island out that way? I believe there's some casinos up that way, which, that was
absolutely the
hour
same
and a half
growth.
ride south,
Same growth pattern. All we wrote it at what affects our revenue streams. So Philadelphia Park was a phenomenal opportunity. I went in there and so quickly we had to move and we brought together probably 30 professionals, people I've worked with, because there was a lot of turnover at that point in time, from the sales of companies, mergers, acquisitions, and there are a lot of talented people on the sidelines.
Yeah.
So we brought a heck of a team in there, identifying talent. We put together the hiring, the training. We implemented the JSOPs and the policies, procedures, all that kind of good stuff, with a lot of support from a lot of really smart people. And boy, was that fun to watch.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, I just stood back and got out of the way, because that was a highly successful, from when they hit the ground running, they were very successful, and that entire ownership group there, which were first class and came from the horse racing industry, extremely bright people, did a heck of a job. So, and with that, so I was in the consulting.
They did it right too. Not to jump off topic, but
Yeah.
they did it right by reinvesting back into the Horsemen's Association in Pennsylvania too, to keep those racetracks going, in order to keep those casinos alive that were going to be fledgling casinos like out in Grantville and whatnot. Because otherwise it wouldn't have happened. They knew that they had to put, I think, 40% of the revenue of the gaming back into the Horsemen's Association to feed that industry and to keep it going.
Yeah.
That's
a great point. And well, you taught me about the horse racing industry. I always, as we said, we all had our different experiences, and you and I have spent a lot of time as friends, after the shift, talking about business, and I learned a lot with that. In addition to your, being so popular and great people skills.
You want to buy a horse?
If anybody could sell it, that'd be the guy right there.
Yeah, right.
So with that said, that group definitely knew what they were doing. That was, everybody has their core competency, as HR would say. They came from that horse racing industry, and they owned gaming quickly. Mm-hmm. And again, I stood back out of the way. I learned, but that was the consulting scenario.
Yeah.
It went from being 7, 8 years, 10 years, 15 years as part of a team. Now I was a free agent every 6 months.
Lone wolf.
Yeah.
So very different, right?
Did you find, because I've done consulting my whole life in cybersecurity business in addition to restaurant business. So, starting out as a bartender as well. And then, a buddy of mine wanted to buy a bar, and we bought this bar called Naz's Place. And all of a sudden I owned a bar when all I wanted to do was own a building. But, so here we are. And this is the business I love. But I've done a combined, thank you, about a combined 18 years of consulting in the cybersecurity world. Right. And, the sort of bitch about that business is you're always selling. You're out delivering, but you're also selling. You're always selling. Did you find that because of your networks were pretty strong, going from gig to gig was relatively easy? Or were you out there kind of bird dogging and kind of really having to uncover your next opportunity?
That is such a spot on question. When I first started Opening Solutions, which is what the management consulting group came to be, because I was into solutions. I had no patience for, the roadblocks, right? So, everybody had to bring something to the table. So, but your question is spot on, because I was very, very fortunate, because when Pennsylvania and the gaming, started being approved throughout the United States, just like when I started my business, the hoteliers were imported from the Marriotts and these corporations from other areas around the world, because we didn't have that experience.
Right.
Well, now Atlantic City was the mecca for the gaming experience.
You were the vets.
So all of the folks with the mergers and acquisitions were going around the country because we all had to make a living. Mm. Every mentor of mine was no longer in Atlantic City.
Right.
They were in New Orleans. They were in Las Vegas.
Sure.
they were here. So it was a very transient world, right? So the world that I had never lived, all of a sudden I'm in that world, right? So Pennsylvania was really a lot of expertise from Atlantic City. So that part was easy, that transition from the consulting gig, as you would say. Pennsylvania was very good to me. Las Vegas was very good to me. Then you went into Ohio, you went into Kansas, you went to Atlantic City.
Footprints across the country.
Footprints, right?
Right.
I never had to advertise. The beauty of what I was, as I look back now, because I had to learn. As I look back now, I was very fortunate because of the fact that they pretty much would always call for opening solutions, but it would start with just me.
Right.
So it was a great entry level, right? It was to enter that point of entry was, to bring yourself in, because I was not selling systems. I would also work the shift.
Right.
So I paid for myself the value. So it was the easy sell.
Oh, that's right. I like that. Yeah.
But as you got in there, we knew the need was there. So it would grow to needing this position, that help, these systems, that systems. And the longer we did it, the more systems you had that you brought with you, and you could get up and running real fast. The last piece of that, and why your question is spot on, is I didn't have to advertise or look for work for 10 years. But there was a day when things started getting slower. And with that, you branch out and you try and get a menu of services. And to your point, great question. It was tough. And I learned that everyone sells. You need to sell. Mm-hmm. I remember when I was not real experienced and probably talked too much, that I used to say, I'm not a salesman.
Right.
You need to be sold on certain things. You need to tell people clearly what it is you bring to the table, because at the end of the day, you can save them their business.
Right.
So it's pretty valuable, right? So it was very tough for me when business was tough to go in and try and sell the value. And there's a lot of folks that don't handle that well, and they're not real, nice about your feelings, So that was the rejection piece, when the rejection percentage got higher than it needed to be. That wasn't a real fun job anymore. So I've seen both sides, and it also makes me appreciate just working, and I think that's a big part of what a lot of people are going through right now. So that brought me to full circle, I think.
Yeah.
That's when you're really getting old, when your bio lasts that long, I guess.
You brought something up, and you kept repeating the word hotelier, and I don't think people really understand the culture that European hotel system brought into the gaming world. You know what I mean? It's true. Even down to the uniforms. Like if you look at a dealer's uniform at a table, that's a bellman's uniform from a European hotel.
Yes.
You know what I mean? There's a lot of that culture that came in, and it must have been interesting to see that transition. Like you're saying, from Jersey, being the podunk towns around there, farming towns, to grab that metropolitan look and all that, and to see that those systems come in, it must have been a wild experience.
Well, again, spot on. And it's something that I'll never forget. I mean, with my first week within Atlantic City, I'm sitting in a wardrobe meeting where we have 8 samples of pants with contrasting stripes, and should the jacket have a V in the back, and should it be up here, and do we do should we have epaulets into here so we don't put holes in the new material, and the investment of the showmanship. The different objectives, the different things that we're taught. It's you and I talked earlier about just what's the difference between the small places and the big places.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
It's not really that much,
Mm-hmm.
because at the end of the day, if an owner is clear on what's important to them,
Right. Selling that vision.
based on experience, based down from, it could be in the DNA of the family business that you were taught one way and this is the way we do it because of this reason, and this is the look, or this is the way we staff, or this is the way we do that. The work is to learn what's important and to learn how to teach that and to do it well.
So if you could speak on a little bit about the difference between what Atlantic City is now and the culture, everything down to... All right, so let me ask you this. Scratch that. Let me ask you this. I know for a long time that the hotel, or I should say the casino business, didn't really care about the profit margins in food and beverage because they were making so much money. And then all of a sudden, at one point in time, it became a major aspect of what was going on. When did that happen, as far as when did these companies decide, or not decide, but where food and beverage became an issue, where before they were making so much money that they didn't really care? And was there a difference in how you looked at handling systems prior to that?
This isn't a normal podcast because you guys are cheating a little bit, right? Because you guys have a little bit of experience sitting on the other side of that table there. Fabulous question. I believe the initial part of the question was, what's the difference, pretty much now versus 20, 25, 30 years ago, in my opinion, but I guess I've earned the right to give my opinion now.
Damn right you have.
Right? In my opinion, there was a commitment, goals and objectives from the ownership of the casinos, which were not as heavily invested to shareholders. Decision making was probably more efficient, mainstreamed, quicker. The objectives were, food and beverage was an amenity.
Right.
It was clearly stated that it was an amenity. The profit margin, or the KPI, was very clear. The gaming ruled the day. There is there's nowhere where you're going to get you're going to pay out 9% on a slot machine, and
So I'm
it's not a
assuming
bad
it was
business,
after that mergers and acquisitions world.
I think
came
so.
into play.
I think so. There's people much smarter than me that will give you the details of that. But I think that everybody wrote a business plan, what they wanted to execute, and when they spent that much money to buy a business, they had the right to do so. And the life changed.
Were you looking at metrics early on?
You would look at your monthly P&L. Okay. You would maybe from 10,000 foot, but revenue, money cures a lot of bills.
Yeah.
So if I was doing, $8 million in a 123 seat restaurant, I really, if my food costs went from 32 to 33%, it really, we weren't sweating.
Right.
But I'll tell you what, if that premium player, okay, wasn't effectively engaged when they came to that 123 restaurant and picked out of a crowd, put in a seat, and greeted by name.
That was a bad day.
And if you didn't know exactly what time that limo was coming in with their family, then that was the business plan.
Right.
And that it took a lot of good people, to teach that. So I don't say either side's right or wrong.
Right.
When I was younger, sure, I'd rather have 10 managers than 7. Mm-hmm. If I'm a general manager, but at the end of the day, if we were all still in business for 100 years and stayed together, that'd be okay too.
Yeah. So you were the first person to teach me about the 3 or the 4, depending on who you talk to, P's in management, and it changed how I looked at things. It really did. If you wouldn't mind explaining the 4 or the 3 or whatever you use as far as your management system when it comes to that, because it really did make me. It changed my total perspective on looking at a business. A couple things pop into my mind that fall in line with this. Is number one, the building speaks to you. You know, my father used to say, you know, I love sitting in the bar by myself because the building starts to talk to you. You know, and that falls back in line with 360-degree management, and all of that can be wrapped into the 4 Ps. And you're the first person to teach me that, and to this day, I still use it all the time. So if you wouldn't mind explaining to the audience here what that is.
Well, it's, you know, everybody has their acronyms, right? You know, we've all worked with different companies, and, you know, it's, but the impression that I got as an operator, as a roll up your sleeves worker bee, because I had to remember every day that that's what I brought to the table, you know, to always be able to, you know, affect the day to day, right, in a positive way. You know, we're talking about P's. I had to keep it simple because in a corporate world, coming from a non-corporate environment as a teacher, sometimes the communication back in the day was just overwhelming.
Yeah.
You know, and you still see a lot of that now. You know, there's just so much information being thrown at you if it's not controlled, and that's part of management, to have outlines. You know, it can be overwhelming, and it can be very detrimental to a business. And it was a big part of what made me, when I had to decide, when I didn't know I was going to be a consultant management company, you know, I had to decide what value I brought to the table. You know, keeping on point, moving forward, getting around, you know, not acknowledging problems. Okay, I hear what you're saying. Now how we're going to fix it, right? That's what we do, right? Yeah, who can't talk about problems, right? So the P's, you know, as I recall, Pat, you know, we're going back, is, you know, there were so many different, you know, philosophies of business accounting, you know, but for me, I tried to communicate simply with the team, because you would have 60 managers in a Friday F&B meeting, and you could, you know, go on with policies and procedures that were overwhelming, and you could tell people you can't bring firearms into the building. Who the hell doesn't know that? You know, you get what I'm saying?
Right.
You know, it made me crazy. So with that said, you know, I would say, you know, it really comes down to people. The people are your employees, first and foremost.
Right.
Right? They're your guests, right? And each piece of that is a huge part of how we're going to be successful and really make a noticeable difference. You know, we need to know these people. We need to know how to interview these folks. We need to give them what they need to feel good about themselves. The training, you know. I initially, like most people, training was an interruption of my day.
Great point.
And I had places to go, things to do, and, you know, how long is it going to last? When's the bathroom break? You know, but, you know, as we talked about, when I joined some of these organizations that I thought were going to be simple, they taught me really great life lessons for business. You know, you take your training serious. It's not overwhelming. It's effective. So that people part, the first P, you know, really came down to training. You know, and I really, before we end this conversation, you know, I want to talk about one piece of the restaurant training that I believe was the biggest part of my success with Opening Solutions for 15 years.
Great.
Because I brought it everywhere, and it was unbelievably an eye opener to understand the restaurant business and how to deliver timely service. So it was unbelievable. So, you know, with that said, you know, the P's were for, you know, the people, but the guests, it was for the employees, and that in and of itself has to be a part of what you're thinking every day. That's, as a manager, that's just a part of who you are, what you do, the value you bring to the table. You got to live it, eat it, breathe it, and you got to be the best at it, right? And then you have the product, you know. when I first went into that, how it was different 30 years ago, that European influx of hoteliers, overwhelming. You can't learn a menu, in 3 hours. You can't present a menu in 3 hours. You can't understand how long it takes to present it to a guest and what time it's going to be up on that line. We need to get to that. We need to be, professionals and experts at what we do. That wasn't happening. It was chaos. It was organized chaos. The chef, the culinary scenario was, we didn't understand food. We didn't know how to cook it. We didn't know how to buy it. We didn't know how to plate it. Our job was just stand there and get it out when it was ready.
Yeah, and the chef's a psychopath.
Well, but he wasn't. I mean, I guess now in retrospect, he earned the right to be that, because you have people saying, "Where's this?" 4 minutes after the order. It was lack of education.
Sure.
Right.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, the product itself, the bar business, bartender, simple business really, compared to food.
Right.
Your menu and your ingredients are sitting right behind you, or in front of you. You got to have your ingredients. You got to have your mise en place, and it's got to be right where you need it, because you're on stage, right? Time is money. You got to make it right. It's got to be presentable. You got to have your garnish, the basics, whatever the specification is.
Right.
It's not a fancy term. Decide what you want to be and do it right. But it wasn't being done right. It was, back then, the ideas were there, the money was being spent. It was a shame that we didn't know how to train. Or maybe we didn't have the time to train. I don't know.
Yeah.
It was that busy. But at the end of the day, the P's, right? You got the product, which is food, which is beverage, and that's menu, that's mise en place, that's ingredients, that's training, that's education,
Yeah.
And the work ethic and the timing, it's just phenomenal. When I go into your restaurants and bars today, I almost genuflect, in front of all the employees.
Yeah.
When you're busy, they get busy. And they know what they do, and you got to respect that. So you got the product, and the last, the main P, which sometimes it's at the top of your list, sometimes it's in the middle on the list, but it's never far behind. I don't know if you're concerned with this, Joe, but that profit,
Yeah, a little bit.
yeah, it's that has a lot of.
Every 15 minutes I'm concerned with it. Actually, I have this app that I wrote on Amazon. It tells me exactly where I'm at.
Yeah, was that a Budweiser that just rung up there? That's good.
Yeah. No, but I get a text message every time something's put on my tab. Anytime my discount buttons rang, I get a message. It's amazing. Yeah. It's amazing when I'm in Florida sometimes. That it might pop up on my tab, Doesn't happen much, but it's great to see a new bartender that, is fresh off the boat. And, it's usually a process issue. Like, they just don't realize, they don't know how to handle a situation, like a band guy playing. They see 100% discount, Joe McGee. They hit that button, and that's usually the scenario, But, later to find out, oh, yeah, I saw. Here it is.
Every once in a while.
Sure. Well, that was part of my management consulting. When ownership would see that happen too often, they would call me.
Sure.
Because they didn't want to be the bad guy. So, but at the end of the day, it is a phenomenal business. And it is about the P's, and you really just need to be the best at that. But you can go sideways real fast with how much information, how many problems. Mm-hmm. And how many reasons why we can't, and the great management teams, the phenomenal management teams, are the ones that stay together and say, listen, this is what happened today. This is how we're going to approach it tomorrow. We're going to get better every day. You're the best at what you do, and you want to hear please, thank you, and great job all over the place.
Yeah, right.
But also, that's what was different 30 years ago. You always heard when it wasn't right, but you didn't hear a lot about when it was right.
Yeah, I remember you telling me. I don't remember what property we were at or at what point. And the handful of times that we worked together, but But I think I asked you a question: is when did you know that you were done at that consulting gig? And your answer had something along the lines of like when I'm in the way.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like when you're in the way of, and the people are starting to become the champions of their own environment at that point. But you can see that animosity start to build in them. And I remember seeing that from that point forward. You can see the animosity building in them when you're around. You know what I mean? Because you're like, oh, what's this guy doing here? But, they're starting to get their job at that point, and they're starting to understand their environment and how to effectively go about, doing their day-to-day job. So we talked a little bit about your time in Atlantic City, and one of the bigger jobs I work with you is Margaritaville in Atlantic City. And why don't you tell us a little bit about that, why you were brought in there, and the job that had to be done, because it was one hell of an animal. That's all I could say. It was one of the best times of my life. I know it was difficult in a lot of different ways, but as far as the learning of the corporate big box systems, I didn't really have a grasp on it until that property, and it blew my mind watching you work in that environment. So why don't you give us a little bit about that?
Well, I have the opportunity now to look back, right? Especially now with the pandemic, everybody has a little more time to reflect. I've been so fortunate to be a part of so many different exciting opportunities in my backyard. Mm-hmm. This is my backyard.
Yeah, it is.
Right. And Margaritaville was an opportunity. Now I had started opening solutions 2006 when I opened Philadelphia Park. And we're talking 2012.
Yes. Yep. That's exactly when that was.
So as a learning experience, as I look back, the individual that hired me at Margaritaville, I had a highly successful management consulting business at the time, called me and asked if I'd be interested in helping them open Atlantic City. This individual was my regional director at Planet Hollywood.
Nice.
And he had become the president of Margaritaville. I had not, so you're talking so many years later.
Yeah.
Class individual, phenomenal, well-respected operator. He was a hands-on, no-nonsense operating guru that people just loved and followed. So that's, you probably wouldn't know that. When I look back on that now, so I was doing consultant. Now I'm juggling those balls to your point, but you can appreciate that, Joe. Right. I have this business. Some people, the word consultant is a dirty word. Right. I understand that. You don't really need expertise. They didn't need expertise. But when this was the largest opening that they had done, right, I believe at the time, and again, this is all my opinion. We have to be very careful with these highly successful companies. This is all my opinion.
Sure.
So with that in mind, they don't want a consultant. Okay, well, this makes sense. So right. So bring me on. I'll work within your scenario. Okay, mm-hmm. Done. Right. So I was a regional, and we were opening Bossier City, Louisiana, Cincinnati, Ohio, and we were opening, 4, units, which is the first time they've ever done that in one spot at the time.
Yeah. I
forgot
about that. Yep.
Right. So you had Landshark, you had Margaritaville, you had 5 o'clock somewhere, and you had a coffee grab and go, mm-hmm. right? Which they had never done that concept. That's the way I recall it. So I joined that group, regional, and you were so one of the first people I thought of.
Yeah, I was ecstatic. I was ecstatic about it.
And Joe, you can appreciate that. I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
When you talk about people skills, and you talk about someone that would just create a great environment for the staff and the customer, and to take ownership. It had his name written all over it, and our conversations were one of, I couldn't ask for a better opportunity to show him what I was talking about, because we had spent so many times after our 15-hour shifts talking about that stuff. So with that said, of course, he knocked it out of the park, because the interview process itself was cumbersome, to say the least.
I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah, well,
No, I'm not talking about my interview. I'm fast forwarding now to the actual onboarding of all the people for that property is what I was talking about, not my own.
Yes, and listen, that's the world that I grew up in. Once I left the corporate world in 2000, when I started opening solutions, now I'm the highly experienced opener, which is an entirely different skill set.
Right.
Which the timing, the action plan, the game plan. It's like preparing for Brady versus preparing for the Jacksonville Jaguars quarterback. So at the end of the day, we're talking about Margaritaville. So I was a regional there, coming on. I have my own business. We were tackling Cincinnati, Ohio, Bossier City, Louisiana, and I also had to go down for 6 weeks of training down in Orlando.
Yeah, they didn't mind spending money when it came to management training down there. That's for sure.
But that was an extension of what happened, and I still don't want to end this without me sharing with you guys the most unbelievable aha moment that I had in training with regards to restaurants. Because I've seen a lot of operations and I've managed a lot that were, some were great and some weren't so great. And I think that I've earned the right to figure out why that happened, with that. So with Margaritaville, hey, listen, the excitement level, we talked about that.
Enormous.
I think with one of the other ones, the vibe was it was phenomenal.
Yeah.
I mean, what's not fun about Margaritaville?
Right.
Escapism.
And everybody's talking about it. They can't wait for it to happen. The construction, budget was, off the hook. Everything was first class.
Right.
And you couldn't touch everything. I was traveling back and forth from Orlando back to Atlantic City on a weekly basis for construction meetings. The professionals at that table were unbelievable. The eye for detail was like you, Joe. There are certain things that are not negotiable. This is going to be the way it's presented. This is what the brand stands for. First class. So with that said, that's what I have been doing at that pace. There's a skill set to hire people, to train people, to get them going. And I try to bring that to that particular organization. And quite frankly, they had their own systems, and they were very protective of them, and that's fine. Yeah, I had to respect that. And hopefully, we did a good job of complementing that. Mm-hmm. But one thing I'm very proud of is that we did open all of them on time, early, on budget, and I'll tell you what. You look back in Atlantic City, we set that groundwork. I don't think anybody would have expected that revenue at that point in time to come in. I'm gonna, just venture to say, which is, again, it's what I heard. I wouldn't have any real idea what that P&L would say. But they're probably 17 million a year. And these numbers that I'm throwing out are not a reflection of me. It's what these highly successful companies were forecasted to do. It was part of their 3 or 4 P process, right? The goals and objectives, and I'm glad we were a part of it. But that's what brought it to be. But the learning point for me was that I already had a successful company at that time, and I wanted to be a part of that. So one of the best solutions I ever came up with is I finally figured out opening solutions is only me, so I could take this job. Let me check with myself. So we 9 months to a year. I wasn't going to go to Bossier City and take that job. And I'd already hired Pat and Miles and a first class operating team. So
the excitement level was just unbelievable. Like
wasn't it?
The town needed it at that time.
Yes.
There was nothing along that side of the boardwalk for a very long time.
Yeah.
Ocean had it was the previous casino was not Ocean. Prior to Ocean.
Revel.
Yes. That had been on.
Well, they're one and the same, right?
Yes. Yeah. They were opening up at the same time. That whole part of the boardwalk had just blown up for the first time, and it was like, is Atlantic City coming back? Borgata had already had its footwork in the sand at that point.
Yeah.
It was really, really exciting just to see the town was excited about it. The hiring process, Joe, rented out the convention center to do this.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, I think it was like 5,000 people that came through the doors on a weekend. And just the system of weeding out, like, you would have levels. You would get past, all right, if you get past the front door, if you're not drunk or falling asleep, that type of thing. All right, then you get a checklist that you got to fill out.
This was in Delco?
No, this exactly. Right. It was mind-blowing just to watch all that, and I was so grateful to be a part of it and to be part of that energy. And like it really was like going on a vacation every day to work.
Can you talk about that though? Like, so I'm curious because I believe that, when it comes to managing people and hiring people, right? Because this comes more from my consulting days and managing consulting company. We would get great people in the door. They're absolutely terrible at what they thought they were good at. So my whole concept was they're in the wrong seat on the bus. So somebody might be a great engineer, right? But they're hired because they want to elevate their career to be a manager of engineers, but they happen to be a terrible manager. Yeah. However, if you put them on some innovative project where they're working as peers, but maybe at a slightly higher level, they do a great job because they're just around technical people talking about technical stuff, not actually having to worry about what they say and how they say it to clients and customers and that kind of thing. So that's an example of having, finding the right seat on the bus for somebody. So I'm curious, is that how it was kind of like a job fair thing where they through interview, because you can ask questions and figure out whether people are going to be good for certain things?
Well, I can tell you when it came down to like the bartending positions, when it came to this, it was more of an audition than it was anything else.
Got you.
Like even the
positions. The Flair bartending was
even
trending.
outside of Flair, Flair was the whole production by itself.
That was a separate audition.
You had to pour, you know what I mean, and you had to have the right form when you poured,
right?
That type of thing, and watching that whole process was awesome, just awesome to see, because you're talking about, when you're talking about somebody's off an eighth an ounce, at a place like this, it's doing volume like that, you're talking, could be $50,000. You know what I mean, over the course of a year, right? That we're talking about. Like, literally, as a bartender, you're standing on top of a bank of anywhere from 10 to 30 grand, of your inventory around you. So you got to look at it like that. So we took it as that type of a process where, okay, you know what, the guy doesn't look like he's a decent looking guy. It looks like he's got his stuff together. Then you set up another meeting to make sure they can show up on time, that type of thing. But right. It was definitely a checklist of you being able to get into that position. So as far as your point on, the right people, wrong seat, no, we had to know that they were in the right seat going into it. And the Flair was a different ball game altogether, which I didn't know anything about at that time. Agreed. And I'd pretend like I did. You know what I mean? So I pretended like I knew Flair, but I didn't know anything when it came to Flair at all. So that was all. But that was way more of an audition than just a regular bartending. But they were both more of an audition than they were an interview process. Yeah. It was an interesting. And most of those original bartenders that were hired during that onboarding process are still there.
Wow.
And this is, what's that, 7-8 years later?
Sure.
Yeah. And this is the kind of money they're making. I'll just give you a little example. I remember I wanted to do drawer checks. We had never done drawer checks. This is 2 months in down there, right? 2 months in. We did a drawer check, come out, make sure that your till is matching what is in the POS system.
Yeah,
right?
at current, correct.
Absolutely. Right. 2 hours into this guy's shift, how much do you think he was over? $450 in 2 hours.
So, and that's him not bringing stuff up.
That's $450 that he was going to skim off the top.
Right.
2 hours on a Saturday afternoon. and he'd been working there for 2 months. They estimated he took about 30 grand out of there.
Well, fortunately, that was an aberration, right? Compared to
absolutely,
the 60,
yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
I'll never forget that too, man. The guy said, look, I pulled his drawer and he looked at me, and I said, I'll be back in a minute. And he goes, I'm just going to make a phone call. Boom, right down the boardwalk.
Yeah.
You know, gone. See you. That's the last time we saw him.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's interesting, and that was again. There's a lot of knowledge on this side of the table here. You know, a very well pointed question that we could have a podcast on a daily basis for the rest of the year to talk about the hiring process. You know, and the criteria. You know, for each position. You know, and who are the right folks for that. You know, there's so many different strategies. You know, you have a hire by committee nowadays, which for me personally, I did not agree with. You know, I think that people that understand the job and do a job, in my opinion, are the best ones to identify that skill set as they go through a conversation. But there were just so many different changes in HR philosophy and company philosophy as you went through, and maybe I've learned that they were right in a lot of ways and I was wrong, because maybe you need to have some diversity. You need to have some different type people. They can't all be the X, Y, and Z. You know, and to Pat's point, that's the cash handling and the responsibility. That was a big part as I sit here, talking to you folks about the management consulting piece. There was, I added to the menus over the years. Over the years, you had spotters.
Yeah.
When they spent a lot of money. Some of the companies that I worked with, a huge amount of money, in spotters, and I learned so much with that as to, how you go about that.
So Bob, one of the things in my history, both in the cybersecurity world, which some people know that I've been involved in my life, and the bar business is really, you've touched on the P's and so on and so forth, and I think it's people, right? And training is just so important to me, and I'm at a point right now where I think a lot about that, and I have to figure out in my business, how am I going to start to implement training in a way that's going to develop people, not only for this business, but for their careers, right, long term. You've mentioned a couple times now today that there's some things related to training that you've been able to do in a repeated manner successfully. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. There was a I guess the history, right? We talked earlier about, when I was young and not as experienced, that training was an inconvenience, and I still think that that's really something that's quite possible if it's not engaging and it's not, spot on and it's not effective, right? You lose your audience. One of the biggest impacts on me as a food and beverage operator, which I'm trying to be helpful in our conversation, because I have all the respect in the world with the investment and the passion you have for your business. It's very impressive.
Thank you.
But it comes back to what I think we talked about earlier. In retrospect, I think what I've learned, and I've earned the right to talk about, because I've traveled around the country and I've taught this, and I've seen the effectiveness of it with some very, very successful companies, is, the restaurant piece. I met folks in my career that were committed to training. One of them was my partner with Opening Solutions when we opened the Trump Taj Mahal. It didn't matter what he said, it sounded great. Big lesson, effective communication. He was an English individual, first class human being. And I said, you have such a command of the English language, I can't stop listening to you. He said, well, I'm English. Right? And there was a major investment in the Trump Taj Mahal opening training scenario. And the techniques, I guess maybe I was at the point in my career where I was ready to listen, because I had so many different operations that really weren't the best. I had flaws in execution. I had some people better than others. I had people with good days. I had people with bad days, and it was just constant firefighting, right? So a big piece of this was when I went to a company and I did my 6 weeks. And I don't want to really get too detailed, because the first point I want to make is nobody owns training information.
Right.
It's up to you to decide how you want to execute any skill set. And you need to take the information that's out there, and you need to make sure that it's teachable, that it's measured, and that people feel really good about themselves when they make it happen. So I had started my career with high volume. We all have, right? And I think we've all could say we've seen enough chaos.
Right.
But because in our world, the world the three of us live in, when it goes sideways, it's a bad situation.
Yep.
And you can fall down and you don't get up like the commercial.
Right.
And it can be embarrassing, it can be detrimental, and all of the above. So the main point of training was the one company that I worked with. They were so committed, but the content of what they brought to the table was highly effective, and I put it in my toolbox, and I put a lock on that toolbox, and I brought it around the country. In its theory, it sounds simple, but one of the most incredible things, in my opinion, that affected me as a food and beverage person, that I learned was that you can actually take a dining experience and you can take steps of service, from the initial engagement to taking the appetizer order to the drink order, and you could take all of them out, and you can take your menu and you can actually put a reasonable time on that could be expected to meet those numbers. The customer has an internal clock. But when we're busy and we're in our role of working, at 180 miles an hour, I don't think did not used to be aware of the time. A half hour could feel like 10 minutes to us.
Right.
So at the end of the day, there was a system where we assigned menus based on cooking times and being in test kitchens, where we assigned times that were reasonable, even when busy, to be met. And when met, you were praised. And people were educated. In the back of the house that used to not talk to the front of the house, and the front of the house that didn't used to talk to the back of the house, now understands that everybody has a game plan, right? There's not servers that are standing on the line, behind the expediter waiting for food that certainly shouldn't even be expected for a medium rare burger, for another 6 minutes.
Right.
So at the end of the day, there were standards set up for each menu. There were ways to establish that. It was reasonable. That when you teach the kitchen and the front of the house this system, that they're going to be praised, and they are going to be really good at what they do. And most important, have you ever sat down having a dining experience and you're in the middle of a conversation and all of a sudden say, I think it's time for my sandwich to get here.
Right.
I have been to so many different dining experiences and fabulous operations that do a great job in a lot of respects, that have no idea what time of day it is anymore, and they've lost their way.
Yeah.
And so the investment, all of that is fine. So the training piece that I learned that I wanted to make sure that I share with you guys, you folks, and outstanding operators that are passionate about what they do, is the education needs to be spot on.
Yeah.
The education needs to make people better at what they do. it needs to increase the customer experience. And those items, people want their food to look good. They want it to be hot. They want it to be cold. Yep. And they expect it in a timely fashion. And they don't really need to be told about it. As a matter of fact, they shouldn't even know we're there. Right? And the best part is that when we deal with our coworkers, when we were young, they were our workers. They're our coworkers now, because at the end of the day, we're in business together. Your bartenders are your cashiers. They're your accountants. Yeah. They go sideways.
Yep.
Party over, right? So they're your coworker, right? So, when we look at those food servers or the servers or whatever our coworkers are, it is an increase in their livelihood. Time is money, with a smile, increased turnover, happier customers, time to sell a dessert, and praise all along the way, if there's a system that you put in where if it's not happening on time and the kitchen's behind or a server's behind, you print it out, you don't say a word. You hand it to your expediter, you hand it to the manager, and you need to keep everybody on track. And if somebody's not on track, we all pull everybody together, because that train, as we know, everybody's behind each other. So the train keeps moving along. Yeah. And that is really a great question. And I wanted to share that, because that was one of, in the 30 some years of training, that was just something that I was inspired to see the effectiveness of that and how everybody benefited from.
I think the greatest operations that I've seen, to your point, have spent a lot of invested time analyzing the time of their steps of service and what they're doing. The expediter has the ticket number and the time that came in circled, and he's constantly evaluating the time on the clock on the wall and the time on that ticket. And it's the manager's able to come in and know how many minutes that ticket's been in, because that's been highlighted already, and they know just by looking at the clock and by the highlighted ticket, all right, this is 3 minutes ahead of what we should be. All right, we can either hold up, but again, it's an orchestra. Everything has to come out at the same time. Like George Perrier in Philly, in Lebec Finn, he was renowned for firing people for letting a plate sit in the window for longer than 20 seconds. But it's a standard of excellence that he attained to, and it's the reason why Lebec Finn became the number one restaurant in the country at one point, and turned Philadelphia into a food city. Yeah. I think that steps of service are overlooked a lot by operators, and even having a step of service in your billfold for that waiter or waitress to see, make sure that they're attaining those levels every single day, and doing the same thing. It doesn't have to be scripted, but it has to be followed, right? For instance, Chick-fil-A, right? What do they say every time you go in there? What's the it's my pleasure, right? It's my pleasure, right? Well, it's my pleasure is a real pain in the ass anymore, and that's all you think about when you're there, right? Because it's so scripted that it seems culty now. Yes. In the beginning, it was a novelty and everybody liked it, but now it's like, oh, Jesus Christ.
Damn, glad to meet you.
Yeah, it's a little ridiculous.
Well, you know how proud. Obviously, I'm passionate about these steps of service, because they made a huge difference in my career. Because people, they visually, and they saw the difference. They experienced the difference. They benefited from the difference. They saw the customer service. There's two ways you can talk about customer service, or you can, get under the hood of that car and you can, increase the performance, right? If you got more horsepower and you got more knowledge, you're going to go. So that was really, wherever I went, with Opening Solutions, because there was more than casino hotels. I went to private membership clubs, and I did work all through Florida for years. But it never changed that when you gave that staff that knowledge, it became theirs, and boy, did they fly.
Yep.
And boy, did you see a difference. And I appreciated that, because for years, I didn't see, that sense of time.
It's almost like giving them a literacy.
Wrong, there was something wrong. You just can't have a bad day every other day.
Right.
If it's not busy, you're having a good day, you think it's okay. But you have to be, there's too much invested for everybody everyone, to not have, these people work hard, and they're really bright people. All of our coworkers, food and beverage people, are incredibly resilient. Mm-hmm. They are incredibly personable. Mm-hmm. They are, some of the most unbelievable, individuals you ever encounter, and I've met them all over the country by the thousands. I've been fortunate to do that, and my son, he's a great one that takes an honest observation of things. As a dad, I thought it'd be great that he'd go to a country club, and work, for a summer, and and enjoy the hard work that we grew up learning. And after one summer, I said to him, so how'd that work out for you this summer? What'd you think? He said, it's okay. And I said, how'd it go? He said, what, food and beverage? The restaurants? He said, that job's ass. So with that humor comes a very, very good point. It really can be an ugly career if the management, the objectives, the commitment, it's not a lot of fun to engage and go face to face with 100 people if what's behind you is not real presentable.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point.
Yeah. So.
There's something that in the spirit of people and training that I think a lot about, and it's time to shit or get off the pot and figure this out. And it's how do you we're talking small box, corner bar, 100 to 200 person, max capacity type venue. How do you career path your employees when you're kind of topped out from a management structure? This happens to be my sort of problem, right? Because here's what you have. You have people that may have worked for me for 10 years that,
wow.
Or 7 years, 6 years, whatever it might be, some tenure. They carry tenure. They left a banking job, being a bank teller, because they were making more money on one Saturday in the bar business than they were at a bank, and they left. And they did that young in their career, right? Or at a young age, or so to speak, mid-20s, whatever it might be. And that was okay. But now, you're in your 30s. What do I do?
Right. Especially
a couple things.
COVID.
Yeah, especially when you think of what's happened to our industry in this regard. But I'd be interested in your thoughts of maybe some things you've seen. I'm looking at ways to maybe build like a 401k program or more traditional benefits for this business. It's really difficult to do, in a tip wage scenario. It really is, because, and I know there's a lot of talk with the new regime, and that may change and this, that, and the other thing, but it's something that I really think about, because not everybody wants to be a bartender for the rest of their life because they can't trust themselves necessarily to save for their retirement, right? They want a 401k and they want to, have tax returns and buy a house someday and all that. So any thoughts on kind of, what you might suggest for kind of career pathing individuals in that regard? I know you've worked in a lot more big box, but, I'm sure there's some thoughts there.
Yeah. Powerful question. We're drilling down on one of the P's, which is people, right? That comes to the elite management folks. They have a lot of tools in their toolbox. Part of that has to be the emotional, psychological piece. So with that, from my experience, for me personally, we had a lot of very, younger versus experienced, less experienced. When the casino hotels opened and H.T. McDougal's, which was not casino hotels, you get 20-year-olds that are taking the cash and loving it.
Yeah.
Right? Loving it. And they're making no apologies. But, as soon as that first slow day comes and, the cash isn't there, they're looking for a new career. Right. That's just organization, right? So I have experienced that. I've experienced it on a personal level, within family members, all of us. as we grow and as we change jobs and as we look at jobs, what gives us value. Not to play Dr. Phil, but people want to feel like adults.
Right.
So especially now in the COVID piece, I worked my way up to huge positions. Not that I was anything special, but there was a lot of business and a lot of big positions in Atlantic City when it grew, in and out of the casinos. But people I know, including within my own family, they were doing hourly jobs, and I started my career, being the rough and tough manager, fighting, with union employees and understanding contract language and thinking that I was going to outsmart that. As the years went by, a couple funny things happened. The rules and the contract became just reasonable things in how to organize and treat people decent.
Mm-hmm.
That's all they really want,
Right.
which should be part of our statute anyhow, right?
Sure.
And that some of the folks in my family, as I was the big, high-paid executive,
Right.
They in staying with those hourly jobs now have pensions, retirement accounts, and benefits that were better than the best benefits I ever had in an executive position. So I think you hit the nail on the head. I think that there's certain things that are important to people at different stages of their life. I think that there's to have great health benefits or the opportunity to have them, and to have the comfort of knowing that you have
Stability.
a pension. It is just wow. I mean, that is extremely comforting. And I'm glad that some of the members of my family, had that. Right. And I'm thankful every day. And I wish that I, in my younger years, would have understood the importance of that, as I'm trying to share with my son now. To have that balance. It's not all or nothing. And then you really do need to take a look at that, and to be an owner and to look at highly valuable folks, and there's only so much upward mobility, to have those conversations with those folks, I think is intelligent, it's thoughtful, it's appropriate, and you should be applauded for that. And I think that when, like we talked about the training, when you give them information that's spot on and it works and it makes sense, it'll be received very, very, very well. So I think that I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, no, I think it comes down to investing in our people. Right?
Sure does.
Yeah.
Sure does. Especially when you don't have that upward mobility because you have stability. It's a good problem to have.
It's a capped environment, right?
Yes.
Like, I would love to add, multiple managers and this, that, and the other thing, but it's not the reality of. Still, I'm trying to maintain a 20% profit margin, man. I'm trying to kill it in the small box, but we can't. It's.
I think something should be said too about managing when you're talking about in a smaller operation, like our models are. Believe it or not, and this guy's the one who showed me the light on that. Like, managing in a smaller operation and dealing with people is a lot more difficult on a small scale than it is large.
Agreed.
Yep.
Because
in a large scale, you got rules and they're set.
Yeah,
right?
that's correct.
Your number, that type of thing. Yeah, of course you're gonna spotlight your champions and whatnot, but in a small scale operation, rules get bent a lot easier because you know somebody longer, or blah 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 blah, and it's way more difficult. And I never really realized until I was put in that scenario where you're dealing with 250 employees and that type of thing. But you're right, the incentive part, it's difficult to think about what can you do and feasibly what can you do, right? I think it's a great question. I think you answered it very well.
It's really, I think, how you frame it, and it's a good situation, and you have to sell it. That the business has supported people for so long, and that there's no guarantees for tomorrow, but due to how well they do their job and how good the customer experience is, that you're going to keep everybody employed and everybody doing the best they can.
Right.
It's a major investment. It's a team.
So I'd really like to hear what your thoughts are on where we are headed in this industry as a whole, obviously with what we've been through in the last 12 months or 10, 11 months. with COVID, where we were, where we're at, and where we're going, and what your thoughts are.
Yeah. Wow, powerful question, right?
That's a whole other episode, PJ.
That was well said. Well said. Well, I think it's a fair statement that none of us have ever been challenged with, more change of paradigm in our business life, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know that I'm qualified, even with 38 years of running multi-million-dollar operations. I don't really know that I'm qualified to answer this question, but as a general discussion, we can guess, we can forecast, and we can think about some tools we could use for strategy. And I think that one thing's for sure, to get to your question of what's changed and where we may be going, is I think if our eyes are wide open, the business model is already, it laid down and it took its beating. It's starting to stand up, and people are starting to put their energies into moving forward, which I think is the first commitment. I think we see that in some of the changes in the food and beverage concept. One of the major ones that I see is the commitment towards takeout. That's a a revenue generator, and it's a skill set that, quite frankly, we didn't train for.
That's correct. It's always
And
overlooked.
quite frankly, other
Always
than
overlooked.
my local Chinese restaurant that made a living with it, they're the only ones that knew how to do it.
Ahead of the game.
But it was sort of an afterthought.
Sure.
It was an inconvenience. I did some training in a very, very busy, area down in Florida, where we were, training the host people, and we asked them to greet the guests, seat the guests, answer the phone if it was ringing, and then we introduced it. And by the way, we're doing this Grubhub, so if you get a couple calls, see if you can handle that while you're seating the room, right? Yeah, and then you'd have 2 or 3 third-party operators, delivery services, and you're not prepared to package it properly. You're not prepared to put the order together properly. Nobody owns the order. Nobody, you got one driver. We don't even know who that is. It has no
Great
relationship.
point. Nobody owns that order.
So the short answer to that is, people are standing up. They're no longer having a pity party. They're kicking ass with this.
Yeah.
Okay? It's a piece of your business. Okay? Well, now, very, very smart people, when their focus is 120% on it, will decide just how much that can contribute. And I think that's one example of the evolving world. You have that. You have the ghost kitchens.
Yep.
Yes.
Right? So what's this really, the business model makes sense.
Yeah.
We're laying on the ground crying because we got knocked on our butts. But at the end of the day, we're saying you really only need one kitchen, like Wawa. Commissary, I believe, is what they used to call it.
Sure.
And you can just pay for one kitchen and one staff, and you can pretty much take care of X, Y, and Z.
Yep.
So I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm saying that I know very, very smart people that have major investments in businesses are now taking it serious. So I think that there's a couple examples that may show us the way of the future. I'm not bright enough to suggest when the public is going to have confidence to come back inside or outside.
Sure.
I do think that there's a, in my opinion, having been out there, I believe that there is a spirit of fatigue and I believe when people are ready to get back out there, it's coming.
Yeah.
I think it's coming. It's not a matter of presidential theory,
Sure.
Anything of that nature. I think that I think we're all very thankful that this science is delivering a potential light at the end of the
Absolutely.
tunnel, and I think people are going to run with that. They ran with it last summer, and there was no light at the end of the tunnel. So,
Right.
So there's a couple opportunities. You have you're asking, what that future looks like. I have one, client project, that's very confidential. It was in New York right before COVID hit. And if it makes any of us feel better here, it was a multi-billion-dollar investment at a really bad time,
Yeah.
right? And, at the end of the day, I went back before I came here today, and I did a little bit of a focus group, and I asked, some of these folks, what do you see? This, the city itself, the business traffic, the corporate business may not be back for quite some time.
Right.
And your offices and things of that nature, But so with that nature, I think that makes sense, in my opinion. So I think we have to prepare for that. So we have to identify who our guest is. If we're going to take our parties on the road, which would be another thing that people are taking serious, and you have a great logo and it can go on a cup and people can take that into their house and create a party. So be it.
Yeah.
And if you can send a server to a house and deliver that menu and you're not paying for the real estate, I don't think that's a problem.
Right.
I think that a large part of food and beverage, the model was broken before COVID. There's a lot of overhead.
Sure.
There's a lot of overhead. Okay. And at the end of the day, we may come out of this a little smarter, a little leaner, a little more efficient, and not people not feeling sorry for how hard we work.
Yeah.
I
I agree.
I also see a big difference in geographical areas too. Like we're looking at suburbs going to be the hot spot in the summer times.
Right.
You know what I mean?
No question. No
Where
question.
before it was, the city was the place to be. Well, not if you don't have an outdoor seating.
Yeah. Well, you don't work in the city anymore.
Absolutely.
You
You
know,
have no reason to go in.
Right.
Right.
I lived in Jersey City for 10 years. I would go out in New York City for non-work related functions maybe twice a year. And I lived above the Holland Tunnel in those buildings that say, if you lived here, you'd be home.
Right.
I hung out in Hoboken and Jersey City. Right. And it's the same kind of thing. It's just, I could see it, but who wants to take the PATH train in and take a cab home when I can just, take a taxi to Hoboken and go to McSwiggan's and just have my beers and hang with my people, It's
Swiggins, they danced on the bar, didn't they?
Yeah, there's lots happening.
Was that you?
That was not me.
Yeah.
It's different time in my life, but what a great place.
Yeah.
I think you're right. I think, when you're saying it's coming, I think operators are starting to realize too that, atmosphere and environment and experience is going to be key compared to just product. You know what I mean? Like it's, if you're able to have something where it feels like the old days, and feel safe at the same time, I think you're going to be king of the hill at some point, in the near future.
Yeah, I think it used to be an abstract idea that you would take a cocktail to go.
Right.
Especially, kind of odd, in my perception, in my opinion. But I think nowadays, if there's people that are not comfortable, it's not just them. It's they try and engage their audience, be it their family, be it their relatives, be it their friends. It's logical to think that they may have a small gathering at their home prior to gallivanting out. So with that, the in-house dining is no different than room service, quite frankly.
Sure.
Pretty profitable.
Yeah.
If managed properly. And I'm a big believer in the people that work as hard in our business, as smart as they are. If they decide that some of the items that they're waiting to come back aren't coming back, and they get committed to figuring out those other pieces, look out.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with that for them, because I've closed more businesses than I've opened.
Sure.
You know, the model's got to be right.
Right.
And I truly do believe that it's very, very valuable, a good restaurant and bar experience, and people have no problem paying for it. I really believe that.
Yeah.
When done right, you know, and executed properly, it is a good transaction on both ends.
Yep.
And we don't need to be, you know, offering Groupon.
I agree. I agree 100%.
Yeah, let's change that model. I'm all for that.
Point.
Yeah,
Great point.
So, I mean,
So Bob, who was your biggest, I guess, influence in this business when you were coming up, or who was the individual that really like gave you that kind of aha moment?
again, a lot of knowledge sitting on the other side of that table with some, you know, it's getting like work now. It's some tough questions.
Yeah, got the job.
Yeah. Yeah. At the end of the day, it's a very, very simple answer for me. And I've been very fortunate to be in a lot of high-end, high-profile positions, and you know, and representing companies that put me in those positions, and I appreciate that. There was one individual, and an impressive individual that I remember very clearly, and the impact was tremendous. The name was Robert Earl. I'll give you a quick background on the individual. Highly successful, medieval times, you know, group interactive restaurant tour. Grew that and started a little company named Planet Hollywood. Had a partner, brought in celebrity, investors, participants, and was the master showman of creating a brand, of creating excitement. I think we talked earlier about the vibe, right? It takes a lot for me to feel the energy and to just want to, you know, be a part of something. And I remember it clearly, you know. So there was a day when I was in my job there with that company that I was told he was coming to visit. He was doing a property visit. Now at this point in time, I had, you know, decades of experience. I didn't lack confidence. I really was excited for the opportunity to sell the property, to sell myself, to create job security, you know, and I just tried to, you know, do the best I could to be prepared for that, you know. So, okay, he's coming, you know, and he's coming this day, and it's going to be about that time. We'll give you a heads up, you know. And this individual really started Hard Rock, the cafes, you know, as well.
Was he a GM there or a worker there?
Yeah, owner.
Oh, he's owner.
He was a part of it. And again, this is my opinion, what I know of it,
Sure.
with the caveat being the disclaimer that as I understand the development, because there were a lot of people, there was a couple other people that owned certain properties, but there was experience in that brand back in the day for what it was. It's very different than what it is now. But it was still multi-unit, multi-investment, major brand recognition, which led itself to major merchandise sales, along with extremely, high revenues of food and beverage, right? And they were in major cities. We've all seen the logo, right?
Sure.
So that's where he started. And as a side to that, that's where the training steps of service came from. The investment to that, because half of those folks that started there followed the leader when he went from A to B, which is a big part of how the big box works. Teams follow their leader.
That's how you build a consulting company too.
Yeah, well said. So with that said, he's come, and I guess I'm, not talking out of school. When the boss is coming, man, we're up early and we got our coffee and our hair's combed and we're ready to rock and roll, right? So he arrives probably an hour late, and you know, as most Hollywood folks, it's part of the deal, and in comes the PR folks and the photographer, and he's not there yet, but I'm still there, and you know, in my merchandise and whatever, and it was a busy day. It's not really what you're looking for when you know,
Yeah,
Right.
we're wall to wall, and you know, and it's tough business, right? So to fast track this, I'm standing at the podium, you know, waiting for his arrival to you know, give him a, you know, so that I make sure that I, you know, show him through the operation, and I make sure that I have the people where they need to be in the restaurant and behind the bar, and everything's neat and clean. That's what be the respectable thing to do. And he comes in, and I'm ready to give him the tour of what I feel are the highlights of the operation. You know, I think I know, and I know that I have the staffing here, and I have this person there, and I got, you know, this going on there, and all the name tags are right where they should be, and all that good stuff. And so he comes in, and he said, "Okay," you know, another English individual. He said, "So where do you want to start?" I said, "Well, right here. Maybe we can walk through the restaurant operation." "Yeah, I'll be happy to do so. Welcome." And he said, "Well, why would I go through there?" This isn't going as I planned.
Yeah, right.
I didn't understand the question. I thought maybe it was, you know, cultural difference. I don't know. He goes, I said, well, we'll you know, meet some of the folks. You know, they're excited to, you know, meet you. And you know, and I said, so, you know, we're going to walk through the restaurant, maybe bar area, or what do you prefer? He said, why would I go to any of those areas? Why would that be my priority? I'm 20 years in the business. I don't get it. I'm done. I'm like, you know, I better call the missus and tell her, you know, maybe we're going out to dinner. I don't know. You know, he kept me on the hook long enough to be painful, but he was toying with me. This wasn't his first rodeo. And he looked at me and he said, "Where's my merchandise shop?" I said, "Downstairs. And out on the front on the casino floor, we have two of them." He goes, "I know we have two of them." He goes, "Which one would you like to start at?" I said, I had not even gone through it. I had not checked the staffing. So we go down, right? And he goes, "Stand over here with me." He starts to get a little bit warmer, which I really needed that about them because I was ready to go. Yeah? So he said, "Stand over here." And he said, "Watch along with me." And I'm watching. Customer goes up to the counter, talks to the cashier, the associate points to a hat. The associate points, confirms which hat it was, comes over, person looks at it, they bring it up, puts it in a great logo bag, and you know, they leave. And he said to me, he said, "What did you just see?" I'm thinking I'm going again. You know, I'm not getting the questions. I'm just not up to speed here. He said, "What did you just see?" I said, "Transaction." He said, "Okay. Well, what do you think about that?" And I really know it's not correct to not have a response, so I'm trying to, you know, juggle. And I said, "You know, I think he smiled and thought it was a pleasant exchange." And he said, "Stop." He said, "Do you want to know what I saw?" He said, "You wanted to show me your restaurant, right?" He said, we'll go there next." He said, "But let me tell you what I saw." He said, "I saw an extremely pleasant associate greet a guest 2 seconds. Guest looked at my menu, selected something they may be interested in. The sale was made. It was rung up. It was properly packaged with a smile. And the guest walked away happy. He said, "You're Bob, right?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "How long did that transaction take?" I said, 30 seconds. He said, "That's fair." He said, "Okay, now show me your restaurant." Yeah, okay. Up the steps we go. Now I'm ready for this one. And he goes, and I go as I approach the podium to get ready for my walkthrough with him. He said, "Can we go over to the bar area for a second?" I said, "Okay." And he goes, "Let me tell you what it is we're going to see, because this is not my first walkthrough." He said, "You're going to introduce me to your host person. Since it's a busy day, there's going to be a greeter, and then you're going to have a seater. They're going to meet two lovely people. And then I'm going to see the food server, who's going to be greeting our guests. And then you're going to bring me into the kitchen, where I'm going to meet a fantastic expediter, along with the 11 chefs, cooks, associates. And there's 2 more that are going to be in prep. And then you almost forget to introduce me to the bus person. So after meeting 20 people that it takes to service our guests in the restaurant, I would ask you, how long did that transaction take for someone to eat a hamburger?" I said, "Well, I knew the average receiving time." I said, 52 minutes. He said, "Right." And it took 11 people to make that happen. I want you to know that I made more money off of that hat downstairs than I make off that hamburger. So it's the business model.
Yeah.
So, I'm sharing this with humor, but it was something that impacted me because of the fact it ties back to the business model we're talking about that we all know and love. Some of it may be okay to go away, and some of the branding and whatever changes may happen with very, very smart people that have decided it's okay to change it, go for it.
Yeah.
Because a lot of it is great. Some of it can go away, no problem. So even though I thought I knew a lot, there was that one really obvious opportunity to change my profitability that was sitting right under my nose and I had no idea. So very impactful.
Change the vantage point. That's all it is, right?
Talk about pivoting, I would say next time he came, I was in the merchandise shop and asked him to do a walkthrough.
Well, great. Thanks a lot, Bob. This has been just an eye-opening experience, and really appreciate being here and spending some time with us.
My pleasure. Always a pleasure to get with you folks, and look forward to seeing you down the Jersey Shore when this weather turns, and this pandemic backs off a little bit. Yeah, we got places
we'll get out
to go.
and do some fishing.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're gonna do that pricing analysis we did last summer. Right?
Yeah.
Well, Bob, you know how much you mean to me, and I appreciate you coming out. We've both been looking forward to this for a long time, and you're the man, Bob. You meant a lot to me in my career, and for that, I'll be forever grateful.
And that goes right back at you, Pat. Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolute pleasure.
All right.
Okay.
That's great. Thanks, man.
Okay.
Woo.